Here we go, back again with another episode of the Around the Show Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle Showalter, and we are in the best time of the year to be a sports fan. The baseball season's winding down, which is where we're going to start the show with today. But we're also right around the corner from the NBA season, and the NFL season is just starting off. We got a ton of NFL to talk about today. But I want to start, like I mentioned, with baseball. And being September, this is the most exciting time of the year to be a baseball fan outside of, the very beginning of the season when the hype for opening day is still there. You got the September call-ups, the big prospects come up. You're seeing pennant races go down. You're seeing guys, how they're going to fare through the duration of their spectacular seasons, or if they're struggling, are they going to be able to have a good last month of the season to get some momentum going into next year? And I want to talk about a guy who last night didn't make history, but tied history in the Bronx, and that's Aaron Judge, who his team, the New York Yankees, they just kicked off. First pitch was about 5 minutes ago. It is 4:10 p.m. on Wednesday, September 21st right now. First pitch was about 5 minutes ago over in the Bronx between the Yankees and the Pirates. And why am I talking about this? It's obvious. Aaron Judge hit home run number 60 last night, 6-0. 60 home runs in a season in a Yankees uniform has been done now 3 times. The first was by Babe Ruth, who hit exactly 60, the Sultan of SWAT. We all know about him. And the other 61 by Roger Maris, the famed Yankee who broke Babe Ruth's home run record for the Yankees. And by the time you're listening to this, it's very possible that Judge is at 61 or even is at 2 tonight and is at 62 and is the record holder. But being where we are, this is the day that I record, so I wanted to congratulate Aaron Judge on a spectacular accomplishment. You think about the guys that have hit 60 home runs in a season over the course of history. Off the top of my head, there's Babe Ruth, there's Roger Maris, there's Barry Bonds, there's Mark McGwire, there's Sammy Sosa, and Stanton got to 59 a couple of years ago. But off the top of my head, that's it. Aaron Judge now joins the elite of the elite home run hitters in terms of a single season of dominance in the history of baseball. And he did it in a contract year, no less. Bet on himself and has come out and just showed out. It's the best offensive season that we've seen outside of Bryce Harper's 2015, maybe in the last 20 years, outside of a player named Barry Bonds, who you might have heard of before. But an incredible accomplishment. You think about who has played for the New York Yankees, all of those names you can list off. There are now 3 of them that have hit 60 home runs in a season, and Aaron Judge is one of them. So to start the show, I just wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit and talk about how spectacular that is and what an accomplishment it is and how great it is for the game of baseball, man. Anytime that you can have somebody challenge a record from any of these Mount Rushmore guys, the Willie Mays, the Babe Ruths, the Ted Williams, these behemoth figures in the lore of baseball almost, to see Aaron Judge, who is kind of like a throwback style player if you watch him on the field, to see Aaron Judge go out there and have the season that he has and put himself in the conversation with some of these incredible Yankee greats and some of the greatest home run hitters of all time. It's been really, really fun to watch. He's got my vote for MVP if I had one. I think he deserves it. But an incredible accomplishment, and hopefully by the time you guys are hearing this, he hasn't broke the record yet, but if he has, a hat tip to Aaron Judge for that. We'll see how long it takes for him to get to 62. He's got 13 more games, somewhere in that range. I'd have to look to get the exact number, but had to start the show with shouting out Aaron Judge for one of the most incredible accomplishments and one of the most incredible offensive seasons that we'll see in our lifetime. Now, I want to bounce over to the NFL. We're going to spend the rest of the show talking about the NFL. And the first thing that I want to talk about 2 things, really. The first of which is the team that has disappointed us the most so far this season, the team that we had high hopes for, the team that we expected to take that next step to maintain that championship level that they did last season or in the past. What team has disappointed us the most from that category? And which team has kind of snuck up on us? Which team had the good offseason and kind of jumped up into the next tier and are showing out? Which team, was kind of counted out going into the year, but through 2 weeks, they look like world beaters? I want to touch on both of those subjects, and I'm going to start with the good. I'm going to start with the team. They're an NFC team, and they have really came out this year and impressed. In week 1, it was an offensive onslaught. They put up 38 points. This last week, it was the defense that really showed out. They scored enough points to win, obviously, but the defense came out, played against a really good offense, and shut them down. Now, what team am I talking about? That's obviously going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. And this team looks like a whole ass wagon. These guys have balled out from the very first play of week 1. they have been locked in. Nick Sirianni has this team firing on all cylinders in all three phases, especially in week 2, man. If they can come out and play like they did in week 2 all season, it's going to be a really fun year for Eagles fans, myself included. But the interesting things, what makes this team so good? And I think it goes down to the trenches. Now, this Eagles offensive line, what makes them so great and what makes them different from other offensive lines in the league? They're as dominant as anybody in the run game, and they're as dominant as anybody in the pass game. The run game, we saw it last year. They were the best rushing attack in the NFL. They look just as good this year. And their pass blocking seems to really have improved this year after already being very good last year. They're currently tied for 3rd with the Saints in pass block win rate. That's a statistic that measures how often your offensive linemen hold their block for at least 2.5 seconds. They're only behind the Browns, who don't throw the football ever, and the Bears, who have dropped back to pass 40 times through 2 weeks, 20 dropbacks per game. So really, the Eagles are tied with the Saints in terms of teams that actually throw the ball in pass block win rate, which is a great sign. And then last week, I mentioned it. They went up against a Vikings team who in week 1 against the Packers, who were my pick for the Super Bowl out of the NFC and a lot of other people's picks as well, and they made them look like a college team. They absolutely dominated. The Packers had no answer for Justin Jefferson. Dalvin Cook ran all over them as well. Then they come in against the Eagles. They put Darius Slay on Justin Jefferson. He probably plays the best game of his entire life at any level. Dalvin Cook wasn't able to get anything going. Kirk Cousins was throwing fadeaway jump shots that almost looked like into the end zone. And the big thing on offense, it really looks like Jalen Hurts is taking that next step in his development. And we shouldn't be surprised at this point. And it was why coming into this year, after being a little bit skeptical as an Eagles fan about Jalen Hurts, that I kind of turned the corner on him and decided, this guy has earned my trust as a fan. He has done nothing but come in and get better every single week and every single season. Came into this year expecting that another jump, and it looks like he's taken it. He looks more consistent in the pocket. Sure, there's some issues still with mechanics, not the best footwork, still spiking balls just a little bit. But man, when he gets a lane to run, he's as special as anybody in the league not named Lamar Jackson. He is so incredible beyond the line of scrimmage with the ball in his hands, and I genuinely believe that he has improved immensely as a passer, not just this year to last year, but also just since he came into the league. If you look at him in Oklahoma and you look at him now, it doesn't even look like the same player. I'm very excited as a fan of the Eagles to see that, him continue to take these steps going forward and see where he can take this team this year. Now, obviously, we're only 2 weeks in and a ton of things can change, but right now the Eagles are the team for me that have surprised me the most through these 2 weeks, and it really feels like they're building something sustainable. The offense and the defense are firing on all cylinders. They're coaching well. They look like they're coming into games prepared. Their game scripts to start the game and then the second half have been unbelievable on offense. I'm really excited as a fan of this team. And, I really think that this is the team that's next up in the NFC. Now, on the flip side, there's a team in the AFC that I mentioned that is the most disappointing. They're a team that won a lot of close games last year, including in the playoffs, won on 2 last-second field goals in the playoffs, as well as 3 times in the regular season. That's the Cincinnati Bengals, who are 0-2. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1 in an overtime game where Joe Burrow turned the ball over 4 times. They're already chancing for the backup quarterback over there in Pittsburgh. And then the following week, they come out and they lose to a backup quarterback, Cooper Rush, and the Dallas Cowboys. And suddenly Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who were the AFC representative for the Super Bowl last year, are staring 0-2 in the face. They're in a very strong division. The Browns are going to get Deshaun Watson back in week 12. Who knows, they're 1-1. They had an awful loss this week, but they've shown that they can hang in games with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. The Ravens look like if they can stay healthy, they're going to be great again this year, even though they just lost an unbelievable game to the Dolphins. And, the Steelers, they could come in. They're coached by Mike Tomlin. They have a strong defense, good veterans on the team. You never know what you're going to get when you come in and play them. But the Bengals won 5 games last year on a last-second field goal, and I mentioned this on the NFL preview shows. This is a team that we need to seriously be worried about regression back to the mean. They overperformed last year. If just 2 of those field goals in the regular season didn't go in, they don't make the playoffs, let alone, go to the Super Bowl and get to have this darling season where we all anoint them as the team that's next up. Now, everybody knew that the Bengals were winning a lot of these close games last year, and the people that seemed to believe that the Bengals were not going to regress were banking on one thing, and that was the improved efforts for the offensive line coming into this season. And I'm here to say the Bengals' offensive line problems are by no means at all fixed. Joe Burrow is getting murdered this season. He's getting pressured on 31% of his dropbacks. During those, he's 7 of 17 with a touchdown and an interception. And it's on the offensive line. You know, there's kind of a narrative around Joe Burrow that he has a reputation for holding the ball too long, but the numbers really don't back that up. I went through and I looked at PFF's numbers, and among 30 quarterbacks with 400 pass attempts last season, Burrow actually had the 9th fastest time to throw at 2.63, and this season he's even faster at 2.56, even though he's dropped a little bit in the rankings down to 13. And PFF also has a stat that tracks whether sacks are on the quarterback or the offensive line, as well as pressures, whether they're on the quarterback or the offensive line. And Burrow actually sits at 6.7% of his pressures belonging to his own fault. That's tied with Rodgers for a top 10 mark in the NFL. And while the numbers kind of back Burrow up a little bit, they really indict the offensive line. And if you go and look at them, they're bottom 10 in PFF's pass block rating. They're 25th in ESPN's pass block win rate. And the real issue is at the tackle positions between La'el Collins at right tackle and Jonah Williams at left tackle. La'el Collins has been an absolute liability, but Jonah Williams is the one that has really hurt this team a lot. He's given up 10 pressures already and 3 sacks in 2 weeks. That is just not something that's sustainable on good teams. And if the Bengals want to turn it around, this offensive line that they spent a ton of money on, Jonah Williams is the only guy who's there who's homegrown. He was a first-round pick a couple of years ago. The rest of them were brought in on free agent deals. They need to start showing up and earning that money that they were paid, or this Bengals team is honestly not in a good position to allow Joe Burrow to play hero ball and go out there and win football games for them. It worked last year, but if you go and you look, 5 of those wins, including the postseason, came on a last-second field goal. It's just not a sustainable route to success. And if the Bengals want to improve, and they absolutely have the talent to do so, it's not going to come from those talented players like Joe Burrow, from Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, all these incredible weapons that they have. It's going to come from the offensive line bearing down and keeping those guys off of Joe Burrow so he has time to find these incredible weapons that they have. The defense has actually played pretty well. I mean, they held Pittsburgh relatively low scoring. They played into overtime, and Dallas only scored 20 points in the win. It's the offense, and it's mainly the offensive line. Now, the Eagles, my surprise team. The Bengals, my disappointing team. By week 4, this could be inverted, and the Eagles could be terrible and the Bengals could be amazing. That's the beauty of these overreactions early in the season. But yeah, right now I'm rocking with the Eagles as my surprise team and the Bengals as my disappointing team. I'm curious to see if you guys agree. If you guys have other teams, go ahead and drop them down in the comment section below. I spoke briefly about the Cowboys when I was talking about the Bengals, and they're a team that I talked about a little bit last week when I was talking about potentially a Jimmy Garoppolo trade. Dak Prescott goes down with an injury, and they're forced to throw Cooper Kupp out there. Not a lot of people expected them to have much success in Dak's absence. They were able to squeeze out that win against the Bengals. But I want to go back to that conversation that I was talking about them in last week, that Jimmy Garoppolo conversation, and I'm sure you know where this is going. Now, what's the value of the backup quarterback? I think as a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, you can see over here to my left, your guys' right on the screen, it's everything. If you lose your starter and your backup is a capable guy, your season doesn't have to be over, whether the starter's gone for the rest of the year or just for a couple of weeks. And what an insurance policy Jimmy Garoppolo has turned out to be. Not only for, the offense, but for the team as a whole. Kyle Shanahan especially, who has struggled immensely record-wise without Jimmy Garoppolo under center. And this is why I said that the Niners would never entertain this. Jimmy would never want to go to begin with. But why would the Niners entertain this when Jimmy Garoppolo is the ultimate insurance policy? A guy who's comfortable in their system, a guy who they got at a discount, and a guy who they know if they send out there, the locker room will be behind him. You can watch those guys in the field and try to tell me that they don't absolutely love and ride with Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm sure that they love Trey Lance as well, and this isn't a commentary on that, but it's obvious. The locker room loves Jimmy. They always have. They've come out and made comments about it. Multiple guys have that are leaders on that team year after year. Jimmy is a guy who's beloved in the locker room, and he's a guy who's going to be able to keep this ship going, and the season's not over, even though your starting quarterback gets hurt. And obviously, it's a bad circumstance. Trey Lance breaking his ankle, and we'll have conversations on the show, I'm sure, at one point with Christian and Brandon, or even just by myself, about the move to trade 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance. What does that mean now that you've mortgaged the future for a guy who He hasn't played a full season of football since 2019 as a starter. He played one game in 2020. He sat last year, and now this year he started two games, breaks his ankle, and then has to leave and isn't able to return for the rest of the season. So he's essentially going to be 4 years removed from being a starting quarterback when he steps back under center next year, and they traded away their entire future for him. So I'm sure we'll have conversations about that in the future, but right now I want to focus on what does this mean for the 49ers team in 2022? And honestly, and I don't think this is necessarily a take that's going to be unique to me, I think this makes them a better team this year. And this isn't a knock on Trey Lance, but you're playing essentially a rookie quarterback who hasn't had experience in years and is kind of learning on the fly versus Jimmy, who's been in the league for 7, 8 years, something around that mark. He's been in the system for years as well. He's taken this team to a Super Bowl. He had them up 10 points on the Chiefs in the second half of the Super Bowl back when they played each other. This is a guy who has proven success in the NFL, and while he's not, this super athletic, crazy arm, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes type quarterback, he's also not like the brainiac Tom Brady kind of guy. But he's going to go out there, play within the X's and O's of the offense. He's not going to make too many mistakes. Is he going to make throws that wow you know, but is he going to make plays that make you scratch your head and wonder what's going on? Also no. You know what you're getting with Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's an average quarterback. And with this team, with this set of skill players, that might be all they need. With that defense and the coach that they have, the scheme they run, I really think this makes them a better quarterback because they're going to be able to go back, or this is going to make them a better team rather, because they're going to be able to go back and do what makes Kyle Shanahan's offense go. And he doesn't have to figure anything out on the fly. He knows what he has in Jimmy. He knows what plays he can run, what plays he can't run, what concepts work, what concepts don't. And now the Niners just get to lay their ears back and go play football. They don't have to learn anything for the rest of the year. And I really do think that this bodes well out for them, both in real life and honestly, if we talk about fantasy football a little bit as well. I think this greatly raises the value of guys like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, especially when Elijah Mitchell comes back. I think this will help his value as well. You're not going to have touchdowns being vultured at the goal line by Trey Lance, But back to actual football, I think this makes the Niners a more of a contender in the division than I did at the beginning of the year. I would have given them credit for. And it's for all the reasons that I've already said. I really think that they're going to be able to play what they know as 49ers football a lot more with Jimmy Garoppolo under center than they would with Trey Lance. And I'm not saying this is something that the organization would prefer, both in a long-term or short-term sense. I'm sure they'd rather have Trey Lance out there. But for this season specifically, if I'm a 49ers fan, I'm feeling better about my Super Bowl chances today than I did this time last week. It's unfortunate, and I wish Trey Lance a full recovery. I hope he comes back and balls, and this is in no way an indictment on him as a player. We haven't seen enough of him to even begin to make a judgment on him, and this is no commentary on what kind of pro I think he's going to be. He could turn out to be great. He could turn out to be horrible. Not making a comment on that. But Jimmy Garoppolo knows what to do in this offense. He knows how to play within the confines of the system, and I truly believe that he's going to go out there and give them a better chance to win this year. And to round out this week's show, I have to revisit another topic from last week, and this one is directly on the nose, the same exact thing we talked about last week. The Denver Broncos might be in trouble, and it has nothing to do with the guy under center, the guys playing on the field in any capacity, and it has everything to do with what is going on the headsets on the sideline. This weekend by the Denver Broncos was a masterclass on what it looks like when your players are talented enough to carry a coaching staff that is completely and utterly lost. Whether it's time management, whether it's play calling, whether it's your use of personnel, Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos staff have failed miserably in every regard coming into this season. And if you look at what that coaching staff looks like, it's not hard to realize why. There are 0 coaches on the Broncos staff, not a single one with head coaching experience at the NFL level where football is completely different than it is at any other. You have more media availability. You're coaching guys who make more money than you. You've never scheduled out an insane schedule like this. Obviously, you don't have to worry about the roster and stuff with recruiting like you do in college, but the level of everything is jacked up to 11 in the NFL. And not only do no coaches on that staff have head coaching experience in the NFL, Nathaniel Hackett has never been a head coach at any level. High school, maybe Jaff, we don't know, maybe Pop Warner, something like that, but never high school, never college, never in the NFL, obviously. So you don't learn to do things like manage the clock, to communicate with your coordinators on the sideline in a way where you're leading everything. It's completely different than being a coordinator and just calling plays. And on top of learning how to do all of this stuff at the same time as a head coach, he's calling the offensive plays. So it's not surprising to me at all that Nathaniel Hackett is overwhelmed on the sidelines, because he has nobody to take some of that load off that has experience doing some of these things, like managing the clocks, like going and talking with the assistant coaches, getting everybody on the same page. Nobody's had to do that before. And on top of that, he's trying to call plays at the same time. It's just a recipe for a complete disaster and getting overwhelmed at the end of games where milliseconds matter. You need to get that play in. You need to communicate your reads to your quarterback, communicate the protection, all of that stuff. Any other information you need to get to him, that clock cuts out at 15 seconds. So if while the play is running, when that clock cuts off, if you're not sitting there talking to your coordinators, planning the next play, planning the next drive, going over the clock and things like that, you're behind what that other sideline is doing, because they get off the clock they get off the radio with the quarterback, they're talking to the coaches, they're watching the play, they're already strategizing for what's going on going forward. It doesn't seem like that's happening in the Broncos room, or at least that this stuff just isn't happening enough. And it's really showing on Sundays, because these 2 weeks, the Broncos have looked like a complete disaster. And it's really a shame, because they came into this year with so much hype. They have such an impressive roster. Russell Wilson, franchise quarterback. They have all the weapons in the world. Jerry Jeudy, obviously a little bit banged up, but Jeudy, Sutton, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick before he tore his ACL, obviously not relevant to this conversation, but feel like got to bring him up there. And then the defense. I mean, you look at the defense and there's just playmakers at every level. There's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse for the Broncos to be in the situation that they're in right now. They're able to pull out a win this week just because the players were that much more talented than the Houston Texans. But that shit's not going to work every week. It's not going to work against that conference, it's not going to work against that division specifically. When you have to play 6 games against the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Raiders, who you maybe have a roster edge on one of those teams being the Raiders, you have to outcoach those guys. And so far, Nathaniel Hackett and company have not shown the ability to do that, even on a small scale, let alone for an entire game. For right now, if I'm a Broncos fan, I'm very, very nervous. And I'm not saying they got to fire Nathaniel Hackett or anything like that so early on, but there's legitimate cause for concerns if Nathaniel Hackett doesn't turn this around now. Not halfway through the season, not, in a couple of weeks, Sunday. Nathaniel Hackett has to coach his ass off for the rest of this year, or there will be conversations in Denver about his future there, and rightfully so. This is the NFL. This isn't where you learn and you make mistakes and all of that. You come in here, you perform, or you go. That's how it works on the field. That's how it works in the coaching room. That's how it works in the scouting department, in the front office, in the athletic training room. If you don't put up results, you go. And Nathaniel Hackett needs to start doing that, or he's going to meet the same fate, unfortunately. That's going to do it for this week's show. I had an absolute blast. I'm looking forward to week 3 of the NFL season. Eagles' first division game. Super excited for that, taking on the Commanders this Sunday. But a ton of great games lined up. Had some pretty wacky finishes this last week. The Jets with one of the most miraculous wins I've ever seen. But baseball season's winding down, guys. Don't forget, just because football season's going on, don't forget about, America's pastime. We're coming up on the pennant races. There's a lot of really exciting stuff. The AL East race has been a ton of fun to watch. The Mets and Braves kind of trading the division lead back and forth. So don't lose track of baseball, guys. Football's on. We got basketball coming, but the postseason is going to be here soon. It's going to be awesome. I absolutely cannot wait for that. Can't wait for week 3 of the NFL season. And like I always love to say, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you, whether you listen to the whole episode or just the intro. It means a lot to me that you turn this on and you listen, and hopefully you learn something. Hopefully I can provide some value for you guys. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. Thank you guys so much for helping grow this channel. Tuning in today. I will see you guys next week. Thank you very much. Peace.